Over on the front of the camera, we have a little self-timer lamp that'll blink at us and then turn steady for 2 seconds when it's time for the self-timer to fire. And if you don't like that light turning on, you can turn it off by going into A9 and turn that off so that there's no distracting lights on the camera. We've been talking about our sub-command dial. We have a depth of field preview button, and if we're shooting in our video mode, this is what we were pressing to get those indexes. And in a normal shooting mode, what it does when you press the button is it stops the aperture down to the working aperture for that particular photo, and you can see how much depth of field you are going to get. This used to be a big-time professional feature back in the days of film. Now with digital, you could just shoot a photo and you could look at the photo and see how much depth of field you're going to get, but it's still helpful in many other situations. Next up is our Function 1 button. This is another one of the buttons that you get to program to do whatever you want it to do. And so we'll see that when we get around to the menu sections for customizing the buttons. The sensor in this camera is a 20.7 megapixel CMOS sensor with a 1.5 crop. We have stereo microphones out in front. The CPU contacts are on the top side of the mount, which communicate with the lens. We have an AF drive shaft, which is used for the older lenses, pre-AFS autofocus lenses. They use a little old school drive shaft, and that's how the lenses focus. They're a little bit slower and a little bit noisier, but it has that drive shaft so it can handle all of the autofocus lenses back to 1986. And there's a little tiny ridge, a meter coupling lever up here, and this is used for the older manual focus lenses from the 70s and 80s so that the camera knows what's the maximum aperture on that particular lens. And those older manual lenses will have a little ridge that sticks out a little bit, which matches up with that particular lever there. Next up in the ports on the front of the camera, we have our PC flash sync. So if you're going to be hooking your camera up to studio strobes or other synchronization equipment, good chance it's going to plug in here. And then we have the 10-pin remote, which has multitudes of things that you can plug into it. So the MC30 is a real simple plunger style cable release. And so if you want to do bulb exposures and not spend too much money, the 30A would get that done. The 36A has more fancy features. It's got dials and lights and extra features that you can kind of punch into that. And so that's kind of the premier cable release for the camera. If you want to get a little bit more extension because the cord's not long enough, there's a 3-meter extension cord that you can get, the MC21A. If you want to connect up 2 cameras together, you can do that through the MC23A. If you want an adapter cord to hook up one of the older Nikon cable releases, which used, I believe, just 3 points of contact to the 10 points, there is an adapter for that. And then for somebody who's really handy, there is the banana cords, the MC22A. And this is nice if you want to hook up a triggering device of your own device. And so I hooked up one of these. At one point I was doing a lot of sports photography, and I would mount a camera in the goal of a soccer area. And I was shooting with one camera, and I had another camera, and then I had the third camera on the goal line. And how do I trigger that? Well, I got some of the banana cords, and I hooked it up into my own little device, and I had a foot pedal. So I had a foot pedal that I could click, and whenever I put my foot on that, it would trigger the camera taking pictures in the goal area. And so I could do that and the other at the same time if I was really good, but usually it wasn't that good. And so it's a way for you to hook up your camera to trigger through infrared, through sound, other types of physical devices, and it just allows you to be as creative as you want in a way to trigger the camera. One of the other devices that you can put in here is this WR-A10 wireless adapter. And the way this will work is that'll be the receiver. And here is the sender, so you can have your own little wireless remote. And it has its own function button on it, so you can do special functions with it. And if you want, you can get a third piece that would plug into your flash unit. So you could trigger your camera and your flash to this wireless unit that's completely separate. And you can buy either piece individually if you need to, like if you have multiple flash units, or you can buy the whole thing as a kit. That sells for about $160 US. And so it's a great way of triggering your camera. Now it does have limited distance that it has because it's a relatively small remote. We do also have a infrared remote as well. Nikon has had a lot of different types of remotes, but that would plug in through the 10-pin remote as well as the GPS unit. And so if you want to record GPS data, this would be the receiving unit, and that would send the information to the camera's metadata. And if you want to hook the camera up to your own GPS unit, they do have a MC35 adapter cord that will adapt it up to many common different GPS units available out on the market.